Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're going to be going through what I have found to be the easiest way to learn how to sharpen knives, and kind of a just very basic introduction and sort of a beginner's guide to sharpening knives. So we'll get straight into it here. Like I'm sure many of you, have watched tons of videos on how to sharpen knives on the internet, and a lot of them kind of just say the same things over and over again. But if you don't really understand it and it doesn't quite click for you, it might be a little more challenging to learn how to sharpen because you end up teaching yourself and it'll take longer. So hopefully I can help you skip ahead and just tell you what I found to be the best as someone who did not have any experience sharpening knives prior to kind of figuring all this out. Before we kind of get into the thick of it here, I want to just do a very basic explanation of what's going on when you're sharpening a knife so that you can kind of understand better what you should be looking for and how it actually works and what that's supposed to look like. So I'm going to kind of draw it out here. And I'll get into this later, but I think the best type of grind to learn how to sharpen knives on is a Scandi grind knife, because the edge is so big and it's so easy to hold an angle, especially if you're not using like a precision adjust where it holds the angle for you and you kind of are just learning how to sharpen freehand on a stone. And I also think that's helpful. But we'll take our piece of paper here. I'm just going to kind of draw out what's happening for you. So I have my knife here. My knife's dull. I want to sharpen it. I want to learn how to sharpen. Scandi grind is going to be easy, like I just mentioned, because you will be able to very easily figure out the edge angle because it's big, versus a smaller pocket knife like the one I was carrying today. You have a very thin edge you can kind of see, and so it's harder to tell what angle to hold it on properly. So we'll take our Scandi grind knife. We'll kind of push down on the stock of the blade here, and then we'll just bend it up until we feel it stop. Just like that. Super easy to hold the angle. And then we'll just hold the angle, drag it along, make our passes along the stone until we feel a burr. And so what's happening here while we're dragging our knife along the stone, we have our dull knife edge here. Just like that, coming to a point. It's not super sharp right now, whatever's going on here, fine. As we're dragging and making our passes along the stone, we're going to raise one edge over another. And I hope you can see this on the camera very well. I can't really see what I'm filming here. But as we're dragging this along, back and forth, making our passes on the stone, this side will eventually start to, like we see on here, overtake the other side, and it'll sharpen and remove material past the other side. And you see this little marking here is just to show that it's going over. That is called a burr. And that's, again, I mentioned before, I've watched a million sharpening videos. I understood the concept of what a burr is, but I didn't know how to find whether or not I was actually getting a burr, because I was using knives like this where the edge is really thin and fine. There's a million different ways that you can try and find a burr, or you can look for one and such. And I would always struggle with that because I didn't have anyone teaching me and I didn't really know what to be looking for. So another reason the Scandi grind is super effective in helping you with this is because you can take your fingernail. This is the best way that I learned how to check for a burr. You take your fingernail and you just drag it along the edge until you feel a little nick. You can go on either side and you can just feel for a little nick. That's gonna be the best way. Now, when we're making our passes on this side, so we have the logo side facing up, just so you can kind of tell what I'm doing here. The logo side's facing up, we're dragging along, making our passes. The burr is not going to be on the side that you are pressing on the stone, or just dragging along the stone. The burr is going to be on actually the side that's showing, because again, the material is going to kind of go over and like shown on the picture here, it's gonna move over the other side and overtake it. So you want to be feeling for that, and you'll drag your fingernail along very gently, and you'll feel nick. The other side will just feel smooth; it'll just slide right off. And you want to make sure you have that burr all the way along the edge of the knife. So you're going to take your fingernail, do a couple checks all the way along the edge of the knife. And then when that happens, you're going to want to flip it over, and you're going to want to slowly do your passes on the other side, like so. Do your passes, hold it at the correct angle, like I showed before. And then we'll get the burr back again on the other side. But this time, hopefully a little smaller. And each time we'll go back and forth and make it a little smaller, switching back and forth back and forth in between your edges. And eventually you'll be able to get the burr just like this, so that it's just a little line in the middle, kind of on the top. And that's when you're going to take it to the ceramic rod or leather strop or whatever, and you're going to go back and forth and knock off that burr until you arrive at just a point on the knife. And sorry, these are kind of crude drawings, but I'm just trying to illustrate, what's actually happening when you're sharpening. So you're making your passes, you're gonna raise a burr, check for the burr. And again, if you don't have like fingernails that are good enough, or you can't figure that out, some people will say you can take a paper towel and drag it along and see if it sticks along there. You can kind of look for it in the light too. That's a little trickier. You really have to get a large burr to be able to see it in the light, but you can take a flashlight or a light and just shine it and see where the reflection. This knife is kind of poorly sharpened, so it's reflecting a lot of light. I gotta really sharpen it, but again, there are a bunch of different ways. So people do that all kinds of different ways, but the ultimate goal is you want to raise a burr and slowly go back on the other side and go down in your grits. So you want to start with really coarse, move to more fine grits, and then go to a ceramic rod, and then ultimately, ideally, you have a leather strap. Now, if you're doing this correctly, you don't even really need a ceramic rod or leather strap. You kind of can just get a pretty sharp working edge on even just a coarse stone, really. If you're doing it correctly, you can sharpen on almost anything. So I would recommend starting on kind of a stone like this, or I talked about in a previous video, the Work Sharp Field Sharpener, which is super helpful and very easy to use. These have these nice little angle guides, but again, I think the Scandi grind is just super easy to get that edge and hold it. Versus if I'm taking this knife, you can't even feel, when you're hitting the edge. So it's a little more difficult. That's just what I recommend. You get a $10 Mora, literally $10 beater knife. Just practice on it. You can get these really sharp. They're really thin. It's another thing too. This is a little bit stockier of a blade. You want a thin knife, ideally, that you can practice on, so you're not having to take off as much material. But I just go back to, if you can figure out how to check for a burr, you can learn how to sharpen very, very easily. The hardest part is just, getting to a point where you understand, you can feel. And that just comes with time and with practice. You just got to practice a lot. It took me forever to figure this out. I have all kinds of knives that I screwed up the edges on. Now that I really know how to sharpen, I can fix them up, and it's fun. So it's a great process. Make sure you're, again, just being patient. Again, there are millions of videos that are probably out there that are more in-depth or better than this. And if you think that that's a better way to go and for you to learn, that's great. But this is just how the best way that I have found to learn how to do this and teach people how to do this is just, take your fingernail, feel the nicks, flip it over, hold the edge, same side, just like this. You don't even need to be pressing really hard. You kind of just drag along, just like so. And eventually you'll do that enough times where you raise a burr and you can knock it off. And that's kind of just the gist of it. Now, there are all kinds of different schools of thought with this. How do you want to be making your passes? Do you want to just do them straight? Do you want to drag it along in a certain direction? But we won't get into that in this video. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if I'm really that qualified to be talking about that. So we'll just leave it at that for now. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. I'm happy to answer what I can, or others, if there are ways that you learn how to sharpen, feel free to leave them below. It helps some other people out. It's not an easy thing to do. It just takes a lot of practice. And look at it this way: you're participating in your knife hobby, but you're not having to spend any more money on new knives. You're going to try and perfect the ones that you already have, or maybe you're working and you need to have a sharper knife for work. Having a sharp knife makes things a lot easier, makes life a lot easier. So you don't need to have a dull knife when you can learn how to sharpen. Very cheap, very easy. You just, some people pick it up easier than others. So again, that's how I learned how to do it. I hope that's helpful. Kind of just trying to visualize it here, visualize what's going on. These are, again, very poorly drawn pictures, but hopefully you kind of understand what's going on here. And I hope you found this helpful. Thanks to all of you who are subscribed, and all of those of you who watched it all the way to the end here. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, which is unbelievable. I'm super grateful to all of those of you who support the channel. It's really means a lot to me, and it's been a lot of fun making these videos. And hopefully you might have found something a little helpful along the way. But again, thank you for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. Leave your thoughts below, and stay tuned for the next one.